So please join me in welcoming Ann Harvey.
Hi everyone, thanks Chris, great introduction. I'm here because Urban Systems has given us this opportunity to talk about community building in this Vibrant Communities series. So they do a lot of things for the private and public sector, and this is one of them. I think it's pretty impressive that their organization provides this opportunity, this forum for us to discuss. So as I said, I'm here to talk about something that we call Abundant Community Edmonton. And it started in one neighborhood, and it's now in 22. So that's kind of why we're here. We want to share this story and tell you a little bit about how it's grown to be what it is today. So I'd like to get a little bit of a sense of who is in the room today, or at least why you're here. We don't have time to go around and ask everyone, but we all wear different hats in our lives, and we might be here primarily with our work hat on, thinking about the organizations that we represent. Maybe we're here primarily as a citizen or a volunteer where we live and wanting to know more about this thing called Abundant Community Edmonton. Maybe a little bit of both, maybe friends, family here to support / heckle over there in the corner. It's kind of the rowdy groups just over there. You'll have to watch out for them. So just by show of hands, want to get a sense of who is here primarily with your work hat on. You? Who is here more primarily with your neighbor volunteer hat on? Okay. A little bit of both? Anyone? All right, thanks. That helps. Just gives a little bit more of a sense of why we're here. So I'm here to tell you about something that it's an approach that is asset-based and place-based primarily. It's about finding out what is important to people, what they value, what they want to see happen in their neighborhood, what kind of things they like to do in their free time, and what kind of things they have to contribute. So I mentioned it started in one neighborhood. It's grown to be in these neighborhoods here, and actually there's a few more that aren't even on this list. You might see your neighborhood there, and you might be thinking, I have not heard of this. It's very organic, and it takes time to pick up. And we've got about 35 more or so asking about it. And so we're just kind of, we're seeing where this goes with the group that's involved. Really interestingly as well is that it's not just in Edmonton now. We've got several cities who have been contacting us and asking about what's going on up there in Edmonton. Interestingly, even places in the States, Palm Beach, Florida, and Long Beach, California. Howard Lawrence, will tell you about in a moment, is here, and he has gone down and chatted with them about this thing, Abundant Community Edmonton. Okotoks near Calgary started up a couple of years ago. Red Deer just recently being funded through FCSS. So kind of neat to see that Edmonton is yet again on the map. There's a lot of things that the city has accomplished, and Edmonton is on the map for this community development approach. So I want to just quickly tell you, if you haven't read the blurb on what this is, or you have no idea what you're here to listen about, that this is not a community garden program. And I just say that mostly because I've been asked several times if this is a community garden program. I think abundance makes people think of vegetables and flowers and plentiful gardens. This is actually my parents' garden. As you can see, it was nominated for Yards in Bloom. Good job. Good job. So I just wanted to tell you that just in case you did think it was a gardening program and you're here expecting gardening tips, because I'm not your person. I'm barely keeping 2 houseplants alive. It's also not the next best thing. I truly believe that this is not a passing craze, and I don't mean to say that Pokemon Go is not a passing craze either. We'll see. Maybe it'll be around for a while. We'll see what happens. It's pretty fun stuff. It's also not a brilliant new idea. This is not rocket science. It's not something that no one has thought of before. In actual fact, it's an idea that a lot of people have thought of before, and that's why it resonates. Neighborliness is appealing to a lot of people, and even developers of new neighborhoods in the city have picked up on this. This is a couple of ads, relatively recent. Howard found these together. that's what they're selling. Neighbourliness sells. There you can see in this one, or maybe you can't. There's two women there with the old cans and a string type phone thing going on there, and just really showing that that sense of community, that sense of belonging. This is something that is important to us. And lastly, this is not a City of Edmonton program, or at least not a typical one, not a traditional one. What's unique about this is that it's citizen-led. And the city's role then is supporting and enabling. And that's really been key to its success. I'm a City of Edmonton employee, maybe not a typical one, maybe a little bit rogue. Sorry, my director's right there. So I kind of operate in the gap a little, I guess you could say. And my work is valuable if it's supporting and helping the people who are making this happen. So I'm here today to tell you about this because of my role in the development and growth and support of this initiative starting up in Edmonton. But I'm not the one who's actually doing this day to day. Those are the people we're now calling block connectors and neighborhood connectors, and I'll tell you a bit about them. But it's really their story, and I'm privileged to be here to share it. And to also share with you, because I think there's a lot of people here who are interested in that municipal perspective. How does an organization like the City of Edmonton play a role in supporting and enabling a citizen-led initiative? And so what this really is about is discovering what's important to people and building on that, those human assets, discovering them, mobilizing them, bringing them forward. And if we can build that social capital and in one neighborhood, imagine what we can do if that's happening in all neighborhoods. We have limits, of course, and that's maybe where our programs and services come in. That's one of the things that the city is really interested in, is that how can we make our programs and services more meaningful? How can we make sure they're actually responsive and what people want? And maybe it's just a matter of asking and being in a better relationship with the people that we're working with and for. So it's as simple as communicating. And my colleague today said, maybe when you're going out to the grocery store to get milk for your family, you might call and check to see if they already have some in the fridge before you buy a couple of 4-liter jugs. You kind of just communicate and see what you already have before you make decisions on what's needed. So what this essentially is all about is connecting neighbors to one another through conversation, intentional conversation. First relationship building, and then leading into this intentional conversation. It's talking about what people care about, what they want to do, how do they make their life more enjoyable, fulfilling, what kind of things do they want to do, what kind of things do they have to contribute. And if I think about our organization, and probably many of yours, any organization that's striving to make things better, to work with people, we have some big picture questions that we have kind of top of mind. They kind of help us, we have these questions in our mind when we're making decisions about what kind of things we're going to put our assets into. We have limited resources. How do we allocate those resources in a meaningful and appropriate way? So we ask questions like, how can we encourage pride in where we live and shared responsibility and care for the spaces that we have, our local parks, our green spaces, our park benches and bus stops and alleys and roadways and all of these spaces that we share. How can we better encourage shared responsibility for taking care of those? How can we increase safety in the places where we live? We know of the Edmonton Neighbourhood Watch program, and its predecessor was the Block Parent program. How many of you had a Block Parent sign in your window at some point? Red and white signs, yes. So Edmonton Neighbourhood Watch is what that's become now, and always looking for ways to increase safety, to feel like we're okay in the place where we live. We ask, how can we improve our local economy? How do we continue to support local markets, small businesses, small startups? It's 124th Street market there. Well, I guess the sign kind of gives it away. It's pretty obvious, sorry. How can we increase recreation and social opportunities for all? How do we minimize the barriers that limit people's access and participation in the activities that they enjoy? How can we decrease social isolation? How do we reach out to those on the margins? We know isolation is a major problem. How do we find and connect with people that want to be found and connected with? How do we make public engagement more meaningful and impactful? How do we work collaboratively and creatively to ensure people have a voice in the future of their neighborhood where they live? How do we increase local care of each other? How do we work together to build the capacity of neighborhoods to do more for themselves, for each other, and so as to reach their full potential? For any organization, we really need to know the people we are seeking to work with better. And it's about building that relationship with them. One of the key principles of this approach is that a neighborhood can do so many things for itself, that it has so much capacity, and that it's about discovering what those human assets are and inviting them forward. There's a key principle is that everyone has something to contribute, no matter what that might be, big or small, various types of things, and that they actually want to as well. So how do we create an environment where people can share in a way that's meaningful to them? And this kind of is getting past volunteerism, the same 10 people doing everything, trying to fill these roles on a board or do things that they feel that they need to do, and rather doing things that they want to do. So, where did this kind of start? How did this start happening in Edmonton? So, this is very grassroots, and but it starts from the theoretical work of John McKnight there on the right and Peter Block. You can see they've been working on this kind of thing for a while, and one of their books that they wrote is called The Abundant Community, and their work is all community focused, asset based. John is past professor of education and social policy. He's also the co-director of, some of you might be familiar with the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, ABCD. He's been a community organizer for decades. He's 86 now, and he just came up to Edmonton last month, actually, for the Tamarack Conference. And Peter Block is an author, consultant, community organizer, and he has been for years as well. And this book was kind of the culmination of all of that, all of those ideas. So one person who I mentioned here before, his name is Howard. I'm going to point him out there, second row, Howard Lawrence. Howard Lawrence, citizen, resident in the Highlands neighborhood. He approached us in 2013, end of 2012, beginning of 2013. And he's not just any citizen. Well, none of us are. We all have something to offer, right? And this particular citizen has a skill set that it's his background, his education, his expertise is all in the field of community development. That's been his life's work. And so he has been following the work of people like John McKnight, Peter Block, and others, and had some ideas for how to put that work into practice in a really tangible way. He was starting to think of some resources that could be developed. How can we encourage people to rediscover the lost art of neighborliness and build connections and relationships where they live? So he approached me at that time. I was what the City of Edmonton calls a CRC. Anyone heard of a community recreation coordinator? Yes, a few people. I just want to say quickly, the name is very misleading, the job title. It's not just recreation. This is actually it has become a public liaison, community development, community building type role that advises, consults, liaises between groups and individuals with the city on all sorts of civic matters, including but not limited to recreation. The position's actually under review, some of you know, and we're excited to see where that's going to go. It's a very important community building role. Anyways, I was in that a couple of years ago. Howard said, "Hey, is there anything you guys can do to help me out with? I know, the Neighborhoods branch helps these kinds of initiatives, and maybe there's some grants that you can provide, and who knows, what can we do?" So we talked to my then director, Harry Oswin, and sat at this little coffee shop, Mandolin in Highlands. Maybe some of you have been there before, a little bookshop, and just chatted this out. And Harry was really receptive as well. He could see that this could be a game changer. And I'll never forget that day, actually. I drove away in my car, and I was so happy because I felt like this is a really good idea. This is going to go somewhere. And it's far, far exceeded my expectations and continues to each day as it grows. So we could see that there was alignment with our department outcomes. It resonated with us personally. We could see that it would resonate with others in the communities that we were working with. And so we decided that we would explore this further. I just want to sidebar here for a moment. This is related, just to kind of, this is really cool. This guy, Al Mansky, anyone heard of him? Yeah. This is his newest book here, Impact, 6 Patterns to Spread Your Social Innovation. And it just, he so incredibly well articulates the role of Howard, the role that I've been playing, and the role of the leaders within our organization who have been so supportive. So I just wanted to share this a little bit with you. So he writes about these 3 types of innovators: disruptive innovators, bridging innovators, and receptive innovators. And these all have their own set of skills, and they know their limitations. And what they're open to is collaboration with the other. So they all kind of work together. So I'm going to read you this a little bit because it's just so, it really is quite bang on. So the disruptive, they challenge the prevailing way of doing things, the allocation of resources, the power and advice of professionals, and the very purpose of a policy program or organization. They shake the lethargy off the status quo. They wrestle a big idea to the ground and make it concrete with limited resources. They prove that the idea works. Disruptive possibilities are found in the most surprising places. In every community, no matter how small or remote, there are people meeting in living rooms and coffee shops, scribbling at their kitchen tables and on their laptops, as they develop ideas for addressing their common challenges, for saving the world. We all want to save the world. Countless people devote their spare time to making the world a better place. Al even quotes John and Peter from their book, Abundant Community, and he says, in which they express, each neighborhood has people with the gifts and talents needed to provide for our prosperity and our peace of mind. Yet these new models, no matter how successful, do not easily become the new standard. They can be ignored or misunderstood. They may be perceived as a threat to the system, inviting hostility or even ridicule. It's not easy to move a new idea from the margins to the mainstream. And that's why bridging innovators are also essential. The bridging innovators are the link between the disruptive and the receptive. They're the link between the formal, the idea and the formal organization and the institutions. They excel at spotting the potential in big ideas, then leveraging their connections, reputations, and resources to make sure that potential is realized. Their support makes disruptive innovators more credible to others in the system. They are equally sympathetic to both the struggles of originators and the restraints of institutions. They act as broker, coach, buffer, champion, liaison, and sometimes peacemaker. These intermediaries explain to disruptors how best to describe or package an idea so it can be understood. They also interpret for disruptors for the constraints, subtleties, and openings in the system. And finally, the receptive innovators. And this is so key. And there's one right here who's played a part in this story. Chantil Shannon is my current director, and herself and Harry Osmond, who I mentioned, a previous director named Doug Costigan. Anyone know him? He's a real champ too. And our leaders, our branch managers, we've got a previous branch manager here too, Heather McCrae, was very supportive before she retired. And our other leaders that we have now in other areas, these are our receptive innovators. The bridging innovators act as that link between the disruptive and the receptive. The disruptive, who want to see their solutions widely adopted, will eventually rub shoulders with society's institutions. Inevitably, there will be some sort of handover in the form of a new law, pool of funds, or regulation. The receptive innovators are the ones with the expertise to get it done. Some people describe receptive innovators as institutional entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs. Essentially, they are talented and committed bureaucrats. Their role is managing the context, complex as it is, in such a way that the innovation has a chance to flourish, widening the circle of its impact. They have an insider's knowledge of the key levers needed to advance an issue, as well as when to move them. They are navigators steering the innovation so that it may flourish and become the new standard. Their specialty is reorganizing their institutions to make sure the solution takes hold the way it is intended to, rather than being watered down. So we've got our receptive innovators, our leadership. I would be that bridging innovator, the one that's just barely holding on to that bridge, looking for creative. And Howard is our disruptive innovator. He's very disruptive, but in a good way. And I'm sure there are several people here tonight who would identify as disruptive innovators, and others might identify you as such too. I'm sure there are receptive and bridging innovators here as well. And all of these positions take courage. And I really want to commend Howard for his courage. It's not easy coming forward with an idea like that to a big organization. And he's making a difference with that work and the work he's doing with the block connectors and the neighborhood connectors that I'll tell you about in more detail very soon. So, how this kind of started to grow, this is a picture in Highlands. Mandalin's just to the left, I think, yeah, and that's La Boheme, and some great art on the side showing the history of this neighborhood. So with the support of the leadership and with the Highlands Community League and people in Highlands, this started to grow in this one neighborhood. And so what we ended up doing was creating kind of a pilot in 2013. And essentially the city provided a grant to Highlands Community League, and they supported Howard, the league supported Howard, in trying things out and being what we call this block connector, initiating conversations and connections. And word spread, and so other neighborhoods started to say, hey, what are you guys doing over there in Highlands? We'd like to do that too. So in 2014, we decided that we would have this expansion of the pilot. And so it grew to 7 neighborhoods that year. And they were almost all self-selected. There were a couple that we kind of nudged forward. But that in itself was a learning. The ones that were nudged forward, it wasn't the same. It really, one of the key learnings was, this is from the citizen, this is from the neighborhood. They decide they want to do this, they hear about it, and then they say, hey, would you be able to support us? And then we say, yeah, sure, let's do it. But it comes from them first. So in that second year, other neighborhoods, Westmount, Boyle Street, Bannerman, Oliver, Lendrum, Bonnie Doon, and then a couple of others started to join in too. They were our road groups, not part of the pilot at first, but the line between pilot and non-pilot dissolved, and we all just kind of became part of this network, this growing network of connectors. And so the number continued to grow to what it is now, 22. I think actually it might be 23 or 24, around there. So what is it really exactly? We have tried to articulate it many times, and so here is our latest attempt at being really concise. There it is. Super concise. Abundant Community Edmonton is a citizen-centered neighborhood engagement and organizing framework with practical processes and tangible resources supported by the City of Edmonton Citizen Services Department. And this framework is asset-based and place-based. And this word framework is very intentionally used. We understand the word program in our institutions and our systems. And in terms of the support that's being offered by the city, yes, that makes sense to define that as a program. In terms of what it is in the realm of the neighborhood, that day-to-day connection and relationship building, that's not really another program. It's just a way of doing things. And a framework, we kind of think of a framework as something you can continue to build on. It's not cookie cutter. It's not. You don't have to do it all the same. You can start to build on that framework in whatever way makes sense for you and where you live. So we like that word framework. We'll probably stick with that one for a little while, maybe a few more months. So what does this actually look like in practice? This is about these block connectors. They are people who live in the neighborhood who become the initiator, the leader of intentional conversations. They just start out with getting to know a few people on their block. And quite often these block connectors are already people who know a lot of people on their block. They naturally gravitate to this kind of thing. They might even already have been doing this kind of thing, or they were thinking about it, and this whole kind of program or approach validates what they're doing and gives them these tools to work with. And so they're increasing neighborliness through this relationship building and these connections and conversations. We've got a little model here to kind of start to illustrate these different key roles. And this is very much a bottom-up thing. We're used to top-down. We're used to, here's your mandate and your budget and your project timeline. Go. Get it done by December 31st, 2000 and whatever. And this has been really bottom-up. It's come from one idea, one neighborhood, and it's continued to grow to what it is now being nurtured by various people. So the block connectors are these little guys in green, and they're the ones that go out to their block or their cul-de-sac or their apartment building or their condo building, whatever it might be. All of these units are different. People ask, okay, so which alley should I use? Like, should I go to the alley side or the front door? Or like, how far should my cul-de-sac extend? And how many floors? And it's like, whatever you want to do, whatever you think is going to work, that's what's going to work for you. There are certainly learnings, and there are certainly things that the current block connectors and neighborhood connectors can share, but it really is for a neighborhood to make it its own. We have something that we're calling the Abundant Community Edmonton Resource Guide, and it has 4 sections. And you can all have one if you'd like. They'll be at the back afterwards. There will be some books and magnets for your fridge. And the block connector section really goes into detail, but simplified detail, I guess, on what this role is all about. And like I've said a few times, I'm probably starting to sound a bit like a broken record. Relationship building, connections, intentional conversations, getting to know people. And this is also online. So, these block connectors have found that going and knocking on someone's door can be a little bit scary at times, even for the really outgoing ones. I heard from this one woman once, we were talking about how you respond to people ringing your doorbell or knocking on your door. And she said that she literally dove, hit the ground behind her couch. She's like, oh my gosh, there's someone at my door. Do not want to open that. And she just dove. And she even did like a little bit of a visual demonstration for us. It was great. And I've heard this before. I mean, if I think about when I lived with my family, the doorbell rings, somebody else get it. Did you call someone? Are you expecting someone? Who's at the door? Who's here? We make plans. So this is not a common thing. We have this historical fear of door knocking, just in the recent past. But if we think back to a little bit further, it wasn't like that really, or maybe small town experiences, but we do remember, and I remember too, borrowing a cup of sugar from the neighbor. My mom would say, hey, can you go get a cup of sugar from Brenda, or a couple of eggs? This was very, very normal. And we would play across 5 or 6 yards. We'd just jump those fences, and all over the place. We played tag and cans, and 5, 6 yards. It was awesome. You could stay out till the streetlights came on. This was kind of the way. And so it's not far back in our memory, which is key, because there's been people who have said, we are in danger of forgetting what it's like to be neighborly. But I think we're okay. We're okay because we're having this conversation right now, and because there's all sorts of other efforts like this. This is not new. This is building upon and enhancing all of the community building efforts that already exist, and just saying, hey, this is a good idea. We need to keep doing this. And that's something important that I wanted to express today too, is that we've got this process and these tools and this guidebook, and it's online and da-da-da-da. But it's bigger than that. This is about social change. This is about remembering what it's like to connect locally, and we have all different types of community. We have our communities of work, volunteer, interest groups. We drive all over the place. Some are local, some are not. We have our family and our friends, and we may say, well, I have everything I need. I don't have time, or nor do I need local connection. But as we start to become more connected locally, we notice a difference in our life. It increases our happiness and our well-being. I know for myself, a couple of my neighbors are here right now. Erin in the back. I live in a condo building downtown. She lives above me. And we had a great time on Saturday having some wine in her place. It's so local. I was sitting there working on this actually. And I was like, I don't want to work on this anymore. And Last minute plans can be tricky, but your neighbor is right there. She can't get away. So we had that. And Roya lives across the street from me too. So easy to go for walks. There was one night, just spontaneous. Suddenly felt like going for a walk. It's tricky to call someone who's 10, 15, 20 minutes away. So that local relationship is really, really important. Howard talks about relational nutrients. We know family is important. We know friends are important. We have our colleagues and the people we volunteer with and the people we do all these things with. But what about our neighbors? It's very unique. One of the things that's been a learning has been that, I don't have time for this extra relationship in my life because I have all these great things going on. I don't need any more friends. But a neighbor is not necessarily a friend. They might become one at some point, as Aaron and I have. But it doesn't have to be a friendship. It's a different level of relationship. It might just be that you know each other's name, and if someone leaves their garage door open, you're going to text them and let them know. Or someone left their bike out on the lawn. If you didn't know them, you might think, oh, it's not my place. I probably shouldn't go over and put the bike up in the backyard. Oh, they might think I'm like someone sneaking around in their yard, moving their stuff. But if you know who they are, then, oh, yeah, that's little Bobby's bike. I'm just going to go and put that in the backyard, just in case. So it just changes the way that we interact. So it's been challenging for these block connectors, though, to overcome this initial kind of cultural barrier. It's surprisingly countercultural to go and meet your neighbors. I mean, for some of us, it's easier than others. But it can be tricky. I mean, why do I even have this job? Why am I even standing here? And it's because maybe we need a little nudge, a little reminder of what is really important in our local environment. So in order to kind of soften the approach, there's been all sorts of strategies and things that have come up. And is that the real time? Wow. Okay, I'm gonna pick it up here. Sorry. We started late. Yeah. Yes. And brain down too. So good. This is a block introduction letter. One of the things that has emerged from the neighborhoods, because this is so collaborative, there's constant ideas. And so rather than going and sitting down with this neighborhood survey and saying, okay, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. What's your vision for the neighborhood? What kind of things do you like to do in your free time? Okay, I know those things that you like to do in your free time. What do you want to do with us neighbors? And what are you good at? What are you going to contribute? Yeah, go. What are you good at? Tell me what you're good at. It was a bit forced at times, a bit contrived. And sometimes we're uncomfortable being asked what we're good at. So they started to kind of ease into this a little bit more, and all sorts of things have been developed that these connectors are really happy to share. Because of this growing network of block connectors, there's this need for coordination. So this important role called a neighborhood connector has emerged, and this very key is a person who lives in the neighborhood. And they might interact and work alongside community builders from organizations that have programs and services to offer, but they are someone who lives in the neighborhood, and that has been key to the success of this. We've used a model that this person is paid. It's a part-time job, about 400 hours a year. We've got all sorts of tools and resources to help kind of coordinate that process. And even a grant, community initiatives program through Alberta Culture and Tourism has been really supportive of this work. And so, but there are many of these people who have also done this work not paid as well. So we've noticed that it works best to have it be a paid position, because then the neighborhood leadership has some control over who that might be. They can put out a posting, do some job interviews, formalize it a little bit, and there's more of a sense of responsibility, and they might be more likely to get the person that has that right skill set and personality. And this is an early tool. This is Highlands, you might recognize. Very organic, writing on paper, figuring out who the block connectors were. Those names are all block connectors, and highlighting which little areas that they were going to kind of be in charge of. And they get together monthly with that neighborhood coordinator. That neighborhood coordinator mentors, leads, coaches, walks out there with them. Sometimes community building staff come too. Margaret is a CRC, and she has, actually I think is the only CRC who has gone out door knocking with a neighborhood connector and has had some really interesting experiences about what that on the ground community building feels like. This is a group in Laurier Heights. And then there's the neighborhood leadership. And this is, we've seen in all cases so far, is coming from the Community League executive. They're endorsing and supporting this. And they have been the ones that have been able to apply on these grants. But they're not doing it alone. It doesn't end up being another thing on their plate, or it doesn't have to be. What naturally happens is that others come forward who create kind of the support team, and it's mentioned in this guidebook too. Individuals in the community who just are naturally interested in this kind of thing, and they end up taking on a leadership role in supporting that neighborhood connector. So those orange guys, those neighborhood connectors, they get together monthly as well. And this is another thing that's kind of emerged, is this monthly collaborative, learning, supportive, bounce ideas back and forth thing. Right now it's happening at Howard's house, Poissons, all the time. Second Saturday of the month, I believe, usually. Sometimes it changes. 10 to 12. Always Poissons. That is a given. And this is open invitation. And it's starting to get a little crowded in there. This is one of the earlier ones, so they might need to move to a bigger space. Yes. So there's been plenty of challenges too. This is not, fluffy, it's all great, awesome story. Like, there's lots of challenges too. You see the map here, it says go away. That's in a condo building in Oliver. Angelica is the neighborhood connector to Oliver. Danny was the previous, now he lives in Riverdale with his partner. And they did end up having a great conversation with the person who lives there. But just kind of demonstrates the kind of social barriers that they're dealing with there. This was a Maclean's magazine, just showing that we've kind of isolated ourselves. We just come in and out sometimes. I mean, there's many of us who are making an effort to change that now, and that's what this is about. Delays in securing funding has been a challenge. Dealing with existing leadership, and they've been really supportive, but just also understanding that it's organic and slow, and that it might not be complete in a year, and that you might not have a block connector on every block by the end of the second year, that it takes time. So just kind of communicating to leadership that this is very organic and it takes a lot of time. The anxiety of the block connectors, keeping themselves organized. We've got a couple of people who their gifts and interests are making databases. So we have two databases, online web databases, the Common Good and the Block Connector. And they can use these as tools in the background to kind of create this inventory of all of this great stuff they're talking about. So if they want to pull a report on what's important to a neighborhood, they can do that. In Highlands, because they started early, they've gone to about 50% of their households. It's a smaller neighborhood, about 1,000 households. And there's a subcommittee of the league that's working on the renovation of their hall. And there's a lot of time and money and energy that goes into a hall revitalization. As anyone here who's involved with community leagues would know, this is a huge project. But interestingly, if you pull a report on what is most important to this neighborhood, at least from 50%, and anyone who does stats type stuff, public engagement, knows that 50% is a lot of people to have information from. Gardening, top. Those are the folks who think this is a gardening program. But that's their top thing. And the hall, as it turns out, is quite low. So I just say this to illustrate that there's a lot of citizen intel here that's really important to the local leadership, and then taking that a step further to the municipality, and you can even take that further. It's kind of just, there's this broken link in our democracy between this fabulous, this community league structure is an incredible social framework we have. It's an amazing asset. But is it really connecting in the way that they want? All good intention. They all mean well. Who are they actually reaching? Who are they actually representing? So really what this is a framework that embraces all the great work they're already doing, builds upon all of their efforts that are already in place, and starts to increase that representation, increase that connection. So, lots of challenges, lots of benefits, neighborly relationship building. We're hearing stories of social isolation decreasing through remarkable, touching stories that give you goosebumps or tears or both about people who are being reached out to. Just in this last couple minutes here, I'm close to the end. Don't worry, I'm not going to go too much over it. A story from a condo building. And this, I think, might have been the one you might have known, Margaret, but it was, they visited a fellow, and he was really shy at first. Was this the one? But he ended up kind of cleaning up his place and invited them in. and they had a chat, and it turned out that they were the first people to visit him in the 4 months that he had been living there since moving from a small town to Edmonton. And so it was pretty impactful for that neighborhood connector and for Margaret, who was there, to see, wow, look at what this could do. This is just one story. There's so many. Another one, a guy who was kind of thought of as like the grumpy old guy down the street. Nobody really knew who he was, or maybe he was a bit sketchy, not quite sure. Nobody knew what his name was. And there was a block connector on this block, and he ended up going and having a chat with this guy. And nothing really happened eventful. It was just kind of a regular conversation, but they exchanged contact information, and the block connector said, hey, if we have a block party, like, do you want us to let you know? Sure, yeah, okay, that's great, okay, bye. 3 weeks later, the block connector has an unknown call on his phone, and he doesn't know who it is. He picks it up, and it's this man, and he's in serious anxiety and experiencing all these symptoms, doesn't know what's wrong. He's like, I think I need to go to the hospital. I think I might be having a heart attack. And he was having a heart attack. And so this kind of demonstrates a couple things. A little bit of the social isolation situation perhaps, but maybe not. Maybe just the proximity, and that's important too. You're a friend or family member 10, 15, 20 minutes away. That's 10, 15, 20 minutes too far in an emergency. So that's where we start to see our safety increase. We're safer and have this sense of belonging, and like there's people who are going to take care of us around where we live. So those all kind of tie in with those big picture questions at the beginning. We're really seeing a lot of exciting benefits here. And as this interest continues to grow, we're wanting to increase the support. I've said we a lot, and I meant to say at the beginning that I didn't mean we, the City of Edmonton. I meant we, the people who are doing this together. Howard, Linda is here somewhere. She's a neighborhood connector. There might even be some other block connectors here, neighborhood connectors. The leadership, the support, Edmonton Federation of Communities, all of us who are interested in just making things better. That's the collective we that's involved. The city does have great resources to offer, and then that's our goal, is supporting and enabling. We've got this book, and we've got community building staff, and we have this ability to facilitate collaboration and connect people within their neighborhood, and then starting to go broader than that. And we share those online with all who are interested, and you're more than welcome to grab a book at the back if you'd like afterwards. So thank you for listening to my story of the story of others today. And yeah, thanks for coming out.